Hi! Welcome to my Brontë year. My name's Erin. This year I'm reading all 7 Brontë novels, every JSTOR article I can find, so many biographies. This is episode 2. Episode 1 was about Jane Eyre and Charlotte Brontë. This is the Wuthering Heights one. The 2026 film came out a week ago. I saw it. A friend saw it, and then we met up for coffee for 2 hours and talked about it. So, let's start with Emily Brontë. Emily Brontë is the second to last child. She only writes one novel, Wuthering Heights, and she is known as the recluse. In the first video I talked about there's this gigantic Brontë myth of they're trapped in this house, isolated so far away from everyone. We're going to talk a lot about myth making through this entire series, right? But Emily only wrote one novel. She was the one who did not go out into the world. She really liked being at home. We have so little really reliable biographical information about Emily, and even less about Anne. The next book I'm going to read is Tenant of Wildfell Hall, which is one of Anne's 2 novels. I'm going to really dive into her. There is a biography on Anne called The Other One. I have 5 pages of notes. They are double-spaced. Emily's mother, Maria, dies when she's 3 years old. They are very isolated, but not geographically. So I'm correcting myself from the last video. One of the tentpole biographies out there of the family is The Brontes by Juliet Barker, and she includes a fantastic map of their town. She's like 4 blocks from the post office. They're self-involved as a family, almost. And Emily, there are stories that she doesn't like to talk to the other people in the town, but their father is a big administrative figure. They are in the town. They're not isolated, they are insular. I'm not sure where I found this. Maybe it's apocryphal, but they're so isolated that Patrick, who's Irish, the kids have an Irish accent. I don't know if that's true, but I want it to be true. Emily and Anne essentially function as twins. There's Charlotte and Branwell. Branwell is the brother, and Emily and Anne. At 17, she goes to a school called Roe Head, where Charlotte is teaching. Emily is a student. They want to start their own school. Doesn't last very long that Emily is there. Age 20, she goes to work as a teacher 8 miles away, so far for her. She doesn't like the students. She has 17-hour work days. It doesn't last. She's a very accomplished pianist, and at age 24 she goes to Brussels in Belgium with Charlotte. They don't fit in. Charlotte really tries to assimilate, but Emily doesn't. She's mocked and bullied by other people. Here's a quote from a fellow student. "I simply disliked her from the first. Her tallish, ungainly, ill-dressed figure, always answering our jokes with, 'I wish to be as God made me.'" Their shared teacher and mentor, Constantine Hager, who we're going to talk about in a later video in terms of Charlotte and her biography and her later works, he says that her intellect was something even higher than Charlotte's and that she should have been a man. This is a longer quote. He's praising this unparalleled intellect and determination and stubbornness. But their Aunt Elizabeth, who comes in when the mother dies to help take care of the family, Aunt Elizabeth dies, so Charlotte and Emily both go home to do the funeral. Emily stays, and Charlotte goes back. In the myth-making, there is this rivalry between Charlotte and Emily. Charlotte writes an introduction in 1850 to Wuthering Heights. The novels come out in 1847. Emily dies 1848. Anne dies 1849, and then Charlotte writes this introduction and biographical note to the 1850 version of Wuthering Heights. And this is the moment where Charlotte drops the pseudonyms, says, "We're women, we're the Brontë sisters," and reading it in the 21st century, this introduction is very unkind because Charlotte is basically shitting on Emily. She's saying her work is immature, my work is better, all sorts of stuff. So in the mythos, there's this rivalry between Charlotte and Emily, and I think it partly is true. I think partly it's just having siblings. I don't know. I'm an only child. But Emily likes being at home. When she is at home, she doesn't have to play by societal standards. She can be whoever she wants. Charlotte wants to be in the world. And so Charlotte maybe resents that Emily can have this freedom and be whoever she wants. And maybe also that Emily isn't trying to assimilate like we see in Belgium. Remind me to come back to that introduction. And when Charlotte does go out into the world, it rejects her. Charlotte doesn't have any female writer figures to aspire to be. She has a bunch of male figures that she wants to be Byron. And she writes to one of her heroes and says, I want to be a poet, I want to be a writer. And he says, try being a girl. So that definitely plays into it. And in terms of the introduction, also, when Wuthering Heights comes out, everyone is astounded by the violence and the brutality. I mean, you're still astounded by it now. And not the same, but similar things in Anne's novel that's published at the same time. There's this nonfiction book called The Brontë Myth by Lucasta Miller that is like my Bible right now, talking about how this myth is created. Part of the introduction is Charlotte being mean. But also part of it is Charlotte's two sisters are dead. And so she wants to protect their reputation in order to benefit herself so that she can exist within this world that she wants to. But she also doesn't want everyone to think her sisters were bad. It's not a clear-cut thing. But in 1844, Emily starts compiling her poetry. I realized maybe in this series I should read some of Emily's poems, but I'm not really a poetry person. If that's 1844, she starts putting them together. 1845, Charlotte finds them and says, they're so good, you should publish them. And Emily says, what the fuck are you doing in my stuff? And then Anne says, I wrote some stuff too. 1846, they publish the poems, and Anne and Emily insist on using male pseudonyms. And here's a quote from Charlotte, I believe in that introduction to 1850. We had a vague impression that authoresses are liable to be looked on with prejudice. True. However, it feels wrong to treat them as a single entity, the sisters, and that's what we're doing here in this video. It has always been like that. That is something that I want to stress in this video. This is not a 21st century or even 20th century thing that we have been doing with these sisters. Even when these books were first published, they were published under pseudonyms, but they were brothers. There was still this element of marketing that's like, they're all written in the same household. Check it out. It has always been there. And remind me, there's this woman named Elizabeth Gaskell. And of all the things I could have anticipated in this series, I never anticipated that Elizabeth Gaskell would be my enemy, but she is. Remind me to come back to that. Jane Eyre is published first. It's a massive success immediately. And then Emily and Anne are published together in one volume. And part of the backlash that comes against Wuthering Heights is, we thought you were going to give us another Jane Eyre. This is not Jane Eyre, which is very true. I just feel like it needs to be said that Emily was happy. Emily was happy at home. Their father was not a tyrant. He was withholding of affection, but lots of people have parents like that. There's a diary entry, and we have 3 diary entries total from Emily's life. I am quite content for myself, having learned to make the most of the present, merely desiring that everybody could be as comfortable as myself and as undesponding. So let's talk about the novel. Wuthering Heights primarily is about Kathy and Heathcliff, who have the greatest love story ever told. They are obsessed with each other. And this dynamic is so obsessive that it pulls down and ruins the lives of pretty much everyone it touches, including their children. This book is so often remembered as a romance that at this point in the Penguin Classics version, which I have, there's even a quote on the back in big font saying, it's not a romance. Come on, guys. And the narrative is framed by this stranger, Mr. Lockwood, comes to rent out one of the buildings on this estate. He meets Nellie Dean, who is the housekeeper who has been a part of this family since she was young. She grows up with Kathy and Heathcliff. I think that's really important. And I didn't notice at all, I think, in my first reading, but really, this is my second reading. I read it for the first time in 2023. And that was something I appreciated about the film. If you want something about the film, that's why you came to this video, don't see it. That's what I can say. Bad movie. Read the book. I'll get more into it later. But Nellie, she is there for Kathy and Heathcliff when they are young. She is there for both of their deaths, raises their children, and Nellie tells Mr. Lockwood this whole story. Heathcliff is brought into this family by Kathy's father, Mr. Earnshaw. He has 2 children, which is Kathy and Hindley, her older brother. There's a website that has a whole timeline of Wuthering Heights, which is very helpful, and I refer to a lot. There's a family tree, and frankly, anytime there's a family tree in a book, I love a chart. Mr. Earnshaw picks up Heathcliff in Liverpool and brings him home and raises him as one of the family. This creates a terrible dynamic between Hindley, who is the son, and Heathcliff, who is treated so well. Heathcliff is even named for a dead son, but Heathcliff is a person of color. He is described as possibly Romani. Heathcliff's ethnic origins are purposefully left undefined, but his otherness is essential to this narrative. And of course, Emerald Fennell, in the film that just came out, cast a white person in it. Heathcliff is a person of color, the end. Princess Weeks has a fantastic video essay about this. We're not going to spend any more time on that. I love this novel, but I have a couple questions that I just want to put out here. Why do we forget the second generation? Cathy has a kid, Heathcliff has a kid, Hindley has a kid. Why don't we talk about that? I think it's only in like one film adaptation. Why? And I think I have some answers to that. And the other one that I don't have an answer to, right, is the novel is split into 2 volumes. Why does it split where it is? Because chapter 1 of volume 2 is the scene where they have it out. It is where Heathcliff comes back. Oh God, there's so much plot here. I think if you're here, you should not expect me to cover the entire plot. He leaves for 3 years, turned into 5 into the movie for some reason. I don't know why. It's one of the climaxes of the book. It's certainly the climax of this front half of the narrative. Why is it in chapter 1 of volume 2? I don't get it. Maybe that's just like a publication thing. My neck is wider than I thought. What I want to talk about the most, this novel is about identity. Heathcliff's identity to himself within the world, and how Cathy and Heathcliff cannot fathom being separate from each other. Their identity is the other person. There's this famous line, whatever souls are made of, his and mine are the same. I am more Heathcliff than myself. This is all in that scene where Cathy says to marry him would degrade me. He only hears the bad part, right? He doesn't hear all of this stuff about how much she loves him. There are 2 huge articles that I want to refer to here. The Psychology of Loneliness in Wuthering Heights by Eric P. Levy, and The Absent Mother in Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights by Philip K. Wyan. Neither Hindley nor Cathy receive any real affection from Mr. Earnshaw. This is coming from Levy. The essence of the childhood love between Heathcliff and Cathy is a sharing of the state of exclusion from love. When Earnshaw dies fairly early on, he receives no love from Hindley, but also that is critical in that Heathcliff's first 12 years of his life, we don't know where it was spent, but he ends up being bought by a man. Their love is their only escape from the abuse and rejection they suffer in their home. Their love is founded on rejection. And then Cathy gets accepted by the Lintons. Her ego has been inflated because Edgar Linton loves her. But when they're kids, an intimacy secure from loss, for it is based on the sharing not of love but of rejection. Cathy and Heathcliff turn loneliness into a community of rejection over which they wield absolute control. Every narrative in history, I think every human action is based on a desire for control. I think that's inherent in who we are. The only love these figures can accept in adulthood is one sustained by fantasy, because that is the only love that guarantees secure possession. Their greatest fear is of rejection, and they know together they will not be rejected. But when Cathy is no longer excluded from something, so Heathcliff serves no purpose to her, and Heathcliff cannot accept that fundamental betrayal and that fundamental separation, she does the one thing that they have implicitly agreed not to do. There's also this great idea in The Absent Mother. There's a theory of human development by Mahler. You didn't think we'd get into psychology. That children for the first maybe 3 years of life do not realize that the child and the mother are separate from each other. There is a steady progression of a child realizing that I have a separate body, that I am a separate person. Heathcliff and Cathy have that mirrored bond where they don't know where one stops and the other begins. And the world starts to force them to see those differences. Their own desires start to force themselves to see those differences. And they're both trying to pursue this idea of perfect love, which is one that fundamentally cannot exist because it is rooted in fantasy. Loneliness and isolation, and ultimately like being with Edgar, who she admits is not the person that she loves, allows Heathcliff and Cathy to think of their relationship as an ideal, and it's never attained. They are not in love with each other. They are in love with this idea of security from rejection. If they were to get together, they might actually hurt each other. They hurt each other enough when they are not together. So many things about this film piss me off, right? A big thing that pisses me off is that Cathy and Heathcliff have sex. They have sex everywhere. I think it is one of the most important parts of this novel that Cathy and Heathcliff never bone. Because that is the ultimate merging of two people's identities. And they are forever kept separate. They are forever denied the opportunity to be one. Heathcliff marries Edgar's sister, Isabella, just out of spite because she thinks he's nice. She has this, again, idea, Isabella has this romantic fantasy of who Heathcliff is. And so they have this child, Linton, who grows up outside of this physical environment and yet has those traits of self-absorption and cruelty. All of those things, I think, exist there before Heathcliff ever physically gets there. There's this moment where Heathcliff even says to Linton, "You're pining for pure love, are you not?" There is pure love, which can never be attained, and that is the childhood idea. And then there is adult love. And ultimately, Cathy II and Hareton, their love is imperfect, but they end up together because they are able to express vulnerability. They are able to say, "Oh, I messed up." They're able to say, "You hurt my feelings," in the moment. And they're able to talk it out. And I hate to be this person, but they're like, if they just talked about their feelings, if they just went to therapy. And yeah. And one of Heathcliff's most defining characteristics is that he refuses to show emotion. I think people forget that. I forget that too, because there's so much brutality and violence. Even when he and Cathy are having it out, he cannot show her his face. Cathy even says to Nellie, "This is not my Heathcliff," because her Heathcliff forever exists in her mind and is fundamentally unattainable in the same way that Heathcliff's version of Cathy is fundamentally unattainable. They don't have sex, even because it's a great visual. Heathcliff digs up Cathy. People say that he gets in there and lies down with her. He doesn't. He's about to jump in and he hears a whisper from the ghost of Cathy. So you have literally the fantasy, imaginary Cathy whispering in his ear and the flesh and blood Cathy down there that he could join, and the voice pulls him away. Cathy purposefully allows herself to get ill. She says, "I'm going to tear myself apart because I can't tear you apart. I will hurt you by hurting myself and also hurt Edgar." There's a quote that I kept thinking, I had a quote in my head that I was positive was from this book, and I kept waiting for it to show up. And I got to the speech where I thought it would be, which is,
"Be with me always. Take any form. Drive me mad. Only do not leave me. It is so peaceful I cannot find you."
I thought the quote was,
"Don't go where I can't follow."
Now that's the greatest love story ever told. You're not supposed to want to be Cathy and Heathcliff. You're not even really supposed to want to be Cathy and Hareton, because they're still hitting each other. They're still calling each other stupid. But they are able to say, "You hurt me." You are able to say, "My pride is fragile." Cathy is able to say, "Oh, well, then I'll change my behavior." Cathy says, "Hareton, why aren't you standing up for me?" And Hareton says, "I have stood up for you. You just haven't been here." And she goes, "Oh, I didn't know that." If they talked it out, this is from the Levy article. "The most important afterlife in the world of Emily Brontë is the life after childhood, the persistence in adulthood of the attitude toward love acquired in childhood." There's that great Cathy line that's like, "To be a girl again, running wild and free." Something like that. Heathcliff needs his suffering even more than he needs Catherine, because even before he and Cathy were together, by the time that they had got there, forced upon him by the world, his identity is hardship and suffering and being less than human. Now I want to dive into the supporting characters, because reading this time, I was able to see the Cathy and Heathcliff narrative, right? But also go, Nellie, how are you telling this story? There is a reason that a writer does everything. Even Charlotte does it a little bit in her introduction. I mean, not a little bit, a lot. There is this sort of idea perpetuated first by Charlotte and then her biographer, Elizabeth Gaskell, then by everybody, that Emily is not writing this with intentionality. That it's like all of these themes and everything came out of this little country girl who couldn't have known it. When we actually learn about the Brontë sisters, they were in the house and they were writing and they were reading. No drafts of Wuthering Heights exist with which is weird. But you know that girl was writing and writing and writing and rewriting and revising. I don't believe that she was struck by lightning and the spirit moved through her. I also think that's just not an interesting way to look at literary criticism. I think the interesting way, and I talked about this in the first video, is by assuming complete and total intentionality. So Emily Brontë does not just tell us the story. She has characters tell us the story through their specific biases. And one thing that I did like about the finale movie is that we get to see that Nellie grew up with them. It is not the three kids of Hindley, Catherine, and Heathcliff. Nellie is there too. Before I even saw the movie, when I was rereading this book, I kept going, oh, how many times are the four of them sitting at this table and Nellie sees Catherine and Heathcliff and their incredible bond and looks at Hindley and says, why don't we have that? Because Nellie is fundamentally also excluded. She is even excluded from Cathy and Heathcliff. This relationship founded on exclusion. There's a lot of people who want to argue that Nellie is the villain. And this is explicitly stated in Emerald Fennell's version. With that specific version of it, I can't kind of argue with it. But I think the term villain also implies or assumes that there is a hero. And there is no hero in this book. To quote an early reviewer who hated the book, all the characters here are utterly hateful or thoroughly contemptible. So yeah, Nellie does bad shit. So does everybody else. Cathy too and Hareton are both at least temporarily raised by Nellie. So is she maybe the secret sauce? Young Cathy never knows her mother. Hareton is just despised by Hindley. Nellie is the one who saw it happen the first time and sees it happen the second time and interferes or chooses not to interfere. The main moment that people point to as Nellie's source of villainy, that Fennell certainly points to, is this line of degradation. Nellie senses that Heathcliff is outside. And in the movie, and in lots of interpretations and even cultural memory, Nellie chooses not to tell Cathy that he's listening. That's not how it happens, bitch. She says degrade, and then she goes, whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. And then from Nellie, ere this speech ended, I became sensible of Heathcliff's presence. He had listened till he heard Catherine say it would degrade her to marry him, and then he stayed to hear no farther. My companion was prevented by the back of the settle from remarking his presence or departure, but I started and bade her hush. And of course, this is Nellie telling us this, so we don't have to trust Nellie. Fully admit that, right? Tells her to shut up. And Cathy goes, why? And Nellie lies. Nellie says, Joseph is here. And she hears Joseph. And Heathcliff will come in with him. I'm not sure whether he were not at the door this moment. And Cathy goes, oh, he couldn't overhear us. First off, I'm not going to say justice for Nellie, but when I was reading that specific article, I was like, don't talk about my girl like that. And so now I have to wonder, why am I feeling like that? What's that all about? Why don't I want Nellie to be criticized? What's going on there? The moment that I really started thinking about Nellie and Hindley is Hindley's funeral. Page 186 of the Penguin Classics version. Class, let's turn to that page. She hears that Hindley dies and she goes over to their house and says, I'm going to do this funeral. I'm going to take care of this. I confess this blow is greater to me than the shock of Mrs. Linton's death. Ancient associations lingered round my heart. When Mr. Earnshaw brings Heathcliff home, he has presents for Hindley and for Catherine and for Nellie. Nellie is part of this family. Hindley is not even in the movie. Fundamentally misunderstands or doesn't care what the text is. He would stand Hindley's blows without winking or shedding a tear, and my pinches. Nellie. Nellie is beating up this kid too. Nellie is part of the help, and even she gets to beat up Heathcliff. And here's a big question I have. On the next page, Heathcliff, knowing perfectly the hold he had on Mr. Earnshaw's heart, he only had to speak and all the house would be obliged to bend to his wishes. Why doesn't Heathcliff tattle? This suffering could be ended. There's so many things to it. First off, to tattle would be to admit vulnerability. To say, Hindley hit me, is to also say, I got hurt. The second is that Heathcliff has been given a life where his hurt does not matter. It is to be expected. It is to be endured. So why doesn't he tattle? Because it would be admitting weakness. It'd be asking for help. Justice for Nellie. Which again, like, the film is able to look into Nellie in a way that took me a second read of the text to find. It can read into Isabella, who I haven't even touched on, read into elements of her character I think the film heightens, but are there inherently within Isabella and her true character within this novel. So Fennell can read this novel carefully to see that, but cannot read the most basic element of Heathcliff's race and otherness. Or she didn't read it closely at all and just broken clock right twice a day. I have to say, in terms of Isabella, I liked the dog collar stuff. I just have to say it. My other question was in terms of narration. Nellie's telling all of this to Lockwood, and Lockwood is telling this to us. Why is he here? Right? Why do we have the double? Is it that we just want a normal person coming into this? What's going on in this weird place? Valid. He's also definitely a figure of comic relief. But he's also lying to us. He continually says, I came here to get away from society. But I'm going to go see Mr. Heathcliff next door. I woke up this morning. I was so happy to stay by myself. And then this servant girl was cleaning out the fireplace. And it put me in such a mood just seeing her. I had to walk 4 miles to my neighbor's house to chat with him. But by Brontë, we are immediately presented with the idea that people are not as they represent themselves to be. It primes us, I believe, to also see Nellie in this way, and also, of course, see the hypocrisy in all of Cathy and Heathcliff's actions, in everyone's actions, right? He's also funny. And I haven't even touched on Edgar. I'm a huge classic Hollywood fan. So I've seen the 1939 version with Laurence Olivier. This book is about him. I'll read it one day. But in that version, Edgar is played by David Niven. I love David Niven. Perfect casting. My whole life when I read, I automatically cast it as a movie in my head. I think that's a big clue as to like, this is why this girl went into film and TV. The only other person that I have like definitively cast in my head is his nephew, Heathcliff and Isabella's son, Linton, who is famously ill all the time. And in my mind, he is played by Bobby Hill. So my question is, Nellie is a busybody. She is interfering. She does wrong, absolutely. But she and Heathcliff are performing the same kind of task of this guiding hand on the second generation. She loves Hareton. She loves Cathy too, even though she lets her be spoiled and lets her get away with a lot of stuff and then starts curbing her. She does say like, hey girl, stop it, cut it out. You're being a baby. We gotta grow up. Read the book. Read this goddamn book. It's so good. There's even a moment where, like, Nellie should know better. Where Cathy is like, I'm just going to go for a walk in the garden. I'm definitely not going to go outside of the garden and go see Linton. Definitely not. Definitely not. And Nellie goes, okay, I'm not going to go out with you today. I'm just going to sit here. Nellie, come on. Now to the films, right? 2 days after I saw this movie, I met up with my wonderful friend Madeline, who is at That Bookish Wish on all platforms. She's doing an essay on this book and the film also. I don't think this novel is hard to adapt. Fennell is known for trying to be provocative and edgy and different and puts all of these new visuals in that you just don't need to because the original novel has such incredible visuals. I don't know that I have seen an adaptation, and this is in like the 3rd chapter or something, that includes Mr. Lockwood grabbing the wrist of a child, a ghost child, and dragging her wrist across a broken window in an effort to kill her. Now that's a cinematic moment. However, there's a moment where Cathy sits on an egg and breaks it. I did gasp at that moment. That moment did succeed. And I will say, Hong Chow and Alison Oliver as Nellie and Isabella did a fantastic job. This movie is bad. It is. But I've also worked in film and TV, and it is very important to me to say that every other person who worked on this movie, you did a good job. You showed up, you did amazing cinematography, you did amazing props and costume design and music. Every single person besides the person who got to make all of the decisions did a great job on this film. I believe that firmly.
Ooh, it's me from the edit booth, aka my closet. I've thought a lot about what do I want to say extra in this video? The one thing we're putting a lot of antagonism on Emerald Fennell that she deserves, right? She made this thing. I don't think even I have been really critical asking Jacob Elordi, why did you take this role? I wanted to add that.
It is a wish fulfillment version of a 14-year-old's reading of the novel. A 14-year-old who wants to see herself as Catherine, who wants the love of a Heathcliff, who wants to be obsessed, a child who feels excluded from adulthood, who has no real basis of understanding what a mature adult loving relationship looks like. It is upsetting how incorrectly Cathy is characterized in this movie. and this is such a mean thing to say, but I have to say it because I think I'm right. Perhaps the best and most accurate representation of Kathy Earnshaw Linton in this film is not Margot Robbie, it is the entity of Emerald Fennell herself, and her arrogance and her absolute indifference to the thoughts of anyone else besides herself. And why make Isabella a ward? Why do that? Why do that? How does it function there? The whole time I'm saying this, I'm like, why do I even need to say any of this? Why are we even having this conversation? The text speaks for itself, but I guess it only speaks for itself if you read it. Let's bring it back. There's no second half. We don't talk about the second generation at all. Why do we do that as a culture? Why do we always forget the second half? The plot doesn't make sense without it. The theme doesn't come across without it. Why do we do it? And I think it's because it contradicts our commonly held views of this narrative as a love story. We see this obsessive relationship. We all want to be loved to madness, I think. Even knowing that it's bad for us, we all want someone to be obsessed with us because we all have a little bit of broken inside of us. We want them to be together and their ghosts are together hunting us on the moors. That's a bad thing. So I think we forget the second half because ultimately there's a happy ending in this story. The ending of this book is, I think the kids are all right. I think it's gonna be okay. And that's not what we want. It doesn't fit our idea of what the best kind of love is. And now to my enemy, Elizabeth Gaskell. So I'm really slowly working my way through the Brontë myth and Juliet Barker's The Brontes. Why do I hate this lady, right? We cannot separate the Brontes from the myth of the Brontes because as soon as the world heard about them, the myth was already there. Elizabeth Gaskell is a female author who reads Jane Eyre and is freaked out by it, doesn't like it, understands like it's good that women are writing, it is, good for society, but she is uncomfortable with it fundamentally. Maybe I'll do a whole video about this. Before Gaskell even meets Charlotte, she is already writing letters to her friends envisioning her. She, from the get, before she even meets Charlotte, she is cutting out pieces of Jane Eyre's life and putting them onto Charlotte. She meets Charlotte once at a party, and suddenly Elizabeth writes letters to all of her friends, telling them Charlotte's entire biography. And it's not like Charlotte was born on this day. It's like, first we go up the winding road to their isolated house, and all of the plants in the flower box are dead. Gaskell never wants to see Charlotte as a real person. Gaskell has her own agenda. Gaskell wants some societal change, but sees Charlotte as fundamentally ill and diseased because Charlotte does not fit the traditional conventionalities of womanhood. She's not married, she doesn't have any kids, she is a spinster, and within popular psychology at the time, spinsterhood is akin to a disease. So Gaskell spends their friendship, which is short-lived, trying to get Charlotte to fit into this understanding that she wants her to be. And then, 2 years after Charlotte dies, Gaskell publishes a biography of Charlotte. And in the way that Charlotte's introductions to those 1850 versions of Agnes Grey and Wuthering Heights tries to soften and make Anne and Emily more palatable, Gaskell does the same thing to Charlotte. Charlotte, in this version of events, is the suffering saint. She takes out all of her edges and lies. She says that Patrick is this tyrant and is breaking chairs all the time, and that's just not true. Patrick was shut up in his study the whole time. He just didn't want to be around them. And this biography comes out in 1857, 10 years after their first novels are published. This timeline is so compact. When Jane Eyre comes out, it's under a pseudonym. Everyone wants to know who Currer Bell is. It is a topic of gossip in all the literary salons, right? And people start to get ideas. And then 1850 comes, Charlotte republishes Agnes Grey and Wuthering Heights and says, I'm Currer Bell, these are our pseudonyms, we're women. And suddenly, everyone wants to invite Charlotte to their party because she's a novelty. And Elizabeth Gaskell is dying to meet her. So before she even meets this girl, she is grafting wishes and her own agenda onto this poor girl. And Charlotte just wants to be accepted. Charlotte has always wanted to be in the world that has always told her, you can't. And Charlotte loses her mother and her two sisters, her two older sisters, very young. And like I said, I think fundamentally almost every human action is about control. Charlotte needs control in her life. Her life is so traumatic as a kid. That's why Gaskell puts all these additional traumas on that's like, you didn't need to. It was bad enough. So much is out of Charlotte's control. She tries to control Branwell and Emily and Anne because they are all she has. And when they die, it is that ultimate level of control to write that introduction and to change their perceptions. And part of it is out of an idea to make sure that they are remembered fondly. And part of it is to protect herself, her future career prospects, and part of it is probably working out some kind of older sister, eldest sister thing. It is all of these things. I was going to read Elizabeth Gaskell's biography, and now I'm not going to. Maybe I will. No, I'm not going to. I'm mad at her. I am mad at this lady. I came into this whole video series being like, why do we have this problem? And I solved it. It's this bitch. Also Charlotte. She is part of this. Any other questions? I don't get Joseph. Why is he here? What is she trying to say with his dialect? Hareton speaks like him. Joseph loves Hareton. Joseph has this reverence for the Earnshaw family and is like so glad. And Earnshaw, being Hareton, is in the family, has control. And Joseph is this gigantic figure of religion. And remember that Charlotte and Emily's father is a religious man. And both women speak to some of the hypocrisy that exists within that. This version has a preface by Lucasta Miller. Lucasta Miller wrote the Brontë myth. Love that lady. What Charlotte cannot do is to accept Emily as a conscious adult artist in control of her own creation. She cannot bear to think of her as responsible for the unredeemed figure of Heathcliff, so she takes the responsibility away, presenting Emily as an unthinking vessel through which fate or inspiration pours. And repeatedly throughout this novel, everything is childlike and infantile, and you're crying like a little baby, and that imagery is used constantly from Nestor. While characterizing their relationship as infantile, it is important nonetheless to recognize that Cathy's longing for imaginary union and completeness is not in itself unusual or aberrant. However, it does represent the very opposite of mature sexuality. Furthermore, this imaginary state is irrecoverable for the human subject precisely because it involves an abandonment of subjecthood or individual identity. And thus, the pull towards it, though universally felt, represents a pull towards either psychosis or death. The novel is far from a story of perfect love, but rather the exploration of both the tenacity and the impossibility of such desire. In the end, such is the paradox of the impossible desire, that it is at odds with the desiring body. It can only lead toward annihilation of the body, a faith that both Heathcliff and Cathy in some way choose for themselves. Like, even a criticism of this book, you know, and this is from high school students, it's hard for me too, that's why there's the family tree in the beginning, is that the names are all so similar. There's Cathy 1 and Cathy 2, there's Edgar Linton, and then Linton Heathcliff and Hindley and Hareton. It's because it's about identity. These characters are difficult to extricate from each other. It is not an accident of the writer, it is on purpose. One thing I really do wish that we got, that I think a film or a mini-series could elaborate on, is I want to know what happened in that house before Heathcliff got there. Like a month or two after Heathcliff gets there, Cathy's mom dies. And when Heathcliff gets there, she's rude and automatic and mean to him and terrible, right? I want to know more about Mr. Earnshaw. I want to know, how did Hindley and Catherine get the way they are when we first meet them? This whole time I'm reading this book, I'm reminded of that line in Sharp Objects that I'm going to butcher a little bit, but it's like, a child weaned on poison thinks harm a kindness. It's about a lot of things. It's also about abuse and violence and withholding love. And while Patrick probably wasn't violent, certainly could have been toxic, certainly was withholding of affection, it won't fuck you up as much. That certainly will fuck you up. So now I'm looking into Charlotte's, there's a biographical note and then there's an introduction. Why are there two? The biographical note is the coming out story, basically, like, oh, we're women and these are our names. She describes Wuthering Heights and Emily as immature, inferior, unripe. Describes The Tenant of Wildfowl Hall, which is Anne's second novel that comes out a little bit later, but before this. Wildfowl Hall had likewise an unfavorable reception by critics. At this I cannot wonder. The choice of subject was an entire mistake. Nothing less congruous with the writer's nature could be conceived. She wasn't like that. She wasn't weird, okay? She is trying to protect this idea of them without actually demonstrating who Anne and Emily were, and also trying to protect her future. And by the way, when she writes this, Anne, who dies second, just a couple months after Emily. Anne has been dead for less than 2 years. Charlotte can be mean and bad-tempered and all that. Charlotte also went through, a bad childhood and lost all of her siblings within like a 1-year span. Branwell and then Emily and then Anne, maybe Emily and then Branwell, doesn't matter, all die super quick. So even the most perfect sister, her brain is going to melt a little bit from that. And I'm sure there can also be an element of, I think like Emily refused medical care up until like the moment that she died, basically. And so I can totally understand Charlotte being pissed. I can again understand even the most loving, dedicated sister being pissed. That's grief, baby. But I'll see you for 10 in Wildfell Hall. We're finally going to figure out who the heck Anne Brontë is. Hey, girlie. But before then, I might just make a video essay about some of these books. I'm gonna go buy a bunch of shit on thrift books. Like and subscribe. And if you obviously check out part 1 of this series, and in addition to that, on my podcast, Required Reading, which helped generate the idea for all of this, we just covered with Madeline North, Jane Eyre. And we talk a lot about that first video essay. It's all becoming very blended together. Look, it's cold. And even though I'm only 28, it makes my knees hurt. So we're going to cut it there. My cat just woke up, walked over to the other one who was napping, and bit her. Don't hump her! I have to go take care of that.